My name is Eddie Simons, and I lived in Maine for my whole life. Maine is one of my favorite states, and it's really cool that I live in there. The town I live in is really cool, Derry. It's just a really cool looking town. But a strange occurrence has happened to me for a full week between me and a statue which was outside my school. In Derry, there was a statue in front of the middle school of Paul Bunyan. You know, the man that went famous because he was so giant and he had a blue ox, and because of his superhuman strengths and many exploits? Well, he used to live in the state that I'm living in right now, Maine, so that's why we had a statue of him. And for those who are wondering, why would they build a statue outside my school? Who knows why? After thinking about it now, I kind of think that maybe they should have just put the statue in the town hall or town center. We have a town center, but no, they decided to build it right in front of our school. Even worse, the statue was facing our school, so it was like facing towards the building. So basically, if you were writing a test or something, and if you look outside the window, boom, Paul Bunyan was standing right out there. It would probably make some kids happy knowing that this man was a hero to the state. But, like I said, there was a situation where I had to experience with this statue for a week. And it was absolutely the most dreadful week I have ever had. You see, this statue opened up in 1961. And the year where I had this scary situation, the year was 1988. So this story is basically all about the full week of my scary encounters with this ginormous statue of a giant. Monday, March 14th, 1988, 3:04 p.m. The last bell rung for the school day has just rung. All the kids were now heading home, and for me, I had to walk home. Pretty difficult, but it wasn't that bad. My house was just around the corner. In front of my school, there's a sidewalk that leads from the entrance to the school down the sidewalk to the road, and then it leads off to either side, leads off to a left and right. For me, I had to go right to get to my neighborhood. So I just exited the school building, and I was walking down the sidewalk until, kabam! My backpack unfortunately fell off my shoulders and fell towards the ground. And apparently, it was unzipped, and so my lunchbox, some of the papers I made in school were flying out. Oh, great, I mumbled to myself while kneeling down to pick them up. But when I was kneeling down, putting the stuff back into my backpack, that's when I heard a voice. A deep voice.
Hello, Eddie Spaghetti.
A ginormous monster voice said, "Hey, Eddie Spaghetti." Eddie Spaghetti was a nickname my entire family called me, including my friends. But the voice was really deep, and I never heard a voice that deep before. I turned around I looked around to see who said that, but no one was there. Just then my eyes locked on the giant, and I saw that the giant's head was facing towards me. The giant wasn't facing towards the building anymore. His head was behind its back, and it was staring at me with a terrifying smile. I was terrified. Then I thought, maybe this is my eyes playing tricks on me. I rubbed my eyes a couple times, but then when I looked up at the giant, it was still staring at me. I knew that this was real and that I just needed to get out of here. I don't even know what the heck was going on. Once I stood up, the giant began to move. The giant lifted his foot off the stone that he was standing off. Gravel flew everywhere. Then his other foot came out of the gravel. And then he jumped down off the stand. He was taller than the tree that was near the statue. He was like 300 feet tall. Next thing you know, part of his body parts, like the plastic that was on him, began to fall apart between his armpits, hand, legs, and every part of him. Just then, his face had a crooked smile on him, and when he opened his mouth, I could see that there was a wooden stick that was holding the statue up. Those are those things what hold the statue up. And his nose fell to the ground, revealing a skull nose, like the ones you see inside gravestones. He then moved his axe, which was hanging on his shoulder, and started storming after me, each step shaking the ground as he walked towards me. I finally got the urge to move, and I immediately ran. So I just left my backpack completely face first on the ground. That backpack will only slow me down if I just kept holding it over my shoulders. That will make me slow, and then it would get me. As the ginormous Paul Bunyan was chasing me, it kept hitting the ground, and it kept hitting the grass. Dirt was flying everywhere. One time, he hit the grass, and dirt fell into my eyes. But I kept going and kept running. That's when until he swung his axe right near my foot and made me go launching forward. I hit the ground with a thud. I immediately felt blood in my nostrils. I looked up at the giant, who was now right above me holding his axe. He then started to laugh. It was the most terrifying laugh I've ever heard from a human or statue. He swung his axe over my head, and I looked towards the ground, mumbling to myself, "It's not real, this is not real, this is not real, this is just a dream, please wake up, Eddie, wake up, Eddie, wake up." Just then, silence. After a minute of laying at the ground, expecting to be hit with the ginormous axe, I looked up, and the statue was gone. I looked around, side to side. On the left was a couple cars going down the street. And I looked to my right. It was a school building. A couple teachers were leaving the parking lot. And then I looked forward. And boom, the Paul Bunyan statue was back on its stand again. Its axe over his shoulders. He was back to normal, looking towards the school, like always. Like it always has been for like 20 years. It was like he never moved at all. I then fell on the ground, exhausted from running, and so relieved I was finally over. But it was far from over. March 15th, 1988, 12:36 p.m. The sound of the calming music and the students patting their feet against the carpet floor. I was now in a social studies test, which was the name of the class, social studies. The whole class was working on a test which was super boring. We only had about 7 minutes before class would end, and then we would be able to go to lunch. Man, I love lunch. And surprise, surprise, my seat was right next to the window. Eventually, I got to question 17. 3 more questions and I'm done with this test. I thought to myself in my mind. I wrote down the answer for question 17, and I went down to question 18, and then, out of curiosity and boredom, I looked outside, expecting to just see the statue standing there like normal, just facing towards the building, and the birds flying in the sky, and the cars going down the road. But I saw something more terrifying. The window was square, and it was facing towards the Paul Bunyan statue, which was across the parking lot, inside the grass. In the grass. And in the grass, the Paul Bunyan statue was there. It was still on its stand like it's always been. But now, his eyes were staring right at my classroom window. No, they weren't directly looking at the classroom window. They weren't completely looking at the classroom window. He was looking at me. My eyes were locked on that statue as he locked his eyes on me. I just stared at him, my mouth wide open, and then I immediately thought about what happened yesterday. The Paul Bunyan statue came to life off its stand and chased me and almost murdered me. I was just about to lean my head closer to the window so I could get a better look until, Mr. Eddie, said my social studies teacher, Mrs. Mitchell. I looked away from the window and looked towards my teacher. Eddie, if you're tired of the test and are you just gonna look outside the window all day, I might have to move you away from the window and I'm gonna have to keep you after school, said Mrs. Mitchell. No, wait, please don't keep me after school, I said. I'm sorry, I just got distracted at the statue outside, I said. Mrs. Mitchell then said, what makes you want to look at it so much? That statue's been outside our school for more than 25 years, and you're now looking at it? I was about to answer, but I just went back to writing my test, and I looked, and I just said, I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell. Just then I finished the quiz, and I handed it to the teacher while other students were handing in their tests too. I sat back down and looked outside, and the statue was back to normal, looking towards the building like always. I began to wonder, what the heck is going on? Just as the school day ended, I walked down the sidewalk and thank goodness the Paul Bunyan statue didn't come alive this time, and I made it home safely. Wednesday, March 16th, 5:54 p.m. It was a beautiful afternoon, or evening. I was walking down the sidewalk while walking with my dog, my German Shepherd, Mr. Chips. Don't ask me why we named him that. It was just a funny name when we got him at the pet shop, when we got him in Wyoming on a vacation trip, in the dog shop. He's been with our family for more than 7 years, and he's a really amazing family pet. Like I said before, my house was right around the corner from the school, and that's why I walked to and from school. So I was taking a walk with my dog near the school building. I was just trying to block out the sun, which was beaming on my face. But I knew the sun was going to be down in like an hour or two. So I made it around the school building, and I looked at it because that's the school I go to this week all the time until I go to high school in like 4 years. My eyes drifted from the school building to the Paul Bunyan statue, and I stopped. Paul Bunyan is gone. He was not on his stand anymore. It was just completely empty. From a far distance, I could still see the tag on the stone that it was being held by, which was the stone that Paul Bunyan was standing on, which read, Paul Bunyan, our state savior. Once I stopped, my dog Mr. Chip stopped as well. He looked at me confusedly. I was just staring where Paul Bunyan once stood, like a couple hours ago before I left school. He was still there when I left school, and he was still there when I took one last look at him before ducking into my neighborhood. Where the heck did he go? Just then I looked down at Mr. Chips, and I noticed something off about him. He seemed to cut the idea that something was wrong, and he was actually staring in the direction of where the statue was, just like 2 hours ago. Or when I came around the corner with my dog. I don't know. And I noticed something. He was shivering to the core. I had never seen my dog shiver to the core before. The only time that he shivered before is when our family is watching a scary movie and he looks at the TV and sees the scary part and immediately ducks underneath the covers. Or when someone rings our doorbell. He usually starts barking before quivering away, thinking it's an intruder. But I've never seen him quiver when a statue is missing. Just then I immediately felt like I needed to get the heck out of there. I knew what happened on Monday, and I did not want that to happen again. So I immediately grabbed Mr. Chips, even though he weighed a couple pounds. I immediately ran as fast as I could while holding a dog. And I immediately ran back to our house, and I put him back on the ground, and we just walked inside. My mom asked me why we were back so early, and I just told them Mr. Chips wanted to come back home. I went back up to my room, and I completely started thinking about what the heck just happened. Where was Mr. Paul Bunyan? Where was he at? And was he watching me that whole time? I didn't see him. And if he didn't really move, we would have heard his footsteps like what I heard on Monday. But my day went out normal. I ate dinner, I went to bed, and my day was just completely fine until Thursday. Thursday, March 17th, 12:17 p.m. It was social studies class again. This time we weren't really watching a test. We were actually watching a movie. Considered we were actually watching Forrest Gump. Don't ask me why our class was watching Forrest Gump. To be considered, we were actually watching Stand By Me. I watched the movie when it came out in theaters in 1986, and I cried a lot. I was just kind of bored that we were watching it again. The last time I saw it was actually a couple months ago. It was kind of like my comfort film. Once again, my seat was next to the window. Thank goodness Mrs. Mitchell didn't move it this time. And I was looking outside the window again because, of course, like I said, I've already seen Stand By Me before. Mr. Paul Bunyan was gone from his stand again. I immediately looked everywhere outside. He was not there. But then I immediately saw him. This time, he wasn't staring at me through the window this time, nor was he trying to attack me or probably break the entire building down and try to get me. He was actually walking around outside. He was like destroying the cars. And I looked around, and he walked around the parking lot. He even walked through the street to that store across the street. He even destroyed a couple cars there. And then he walked around the parking lot again. And then he was about to destroy a tree, but then Mrs. Mitchell said, "Really, Eddie? Again?" I turned my head from the window to Mrs. Mitchell, and then I was like, "Sorry, Miss Mitchell, I just got distracted." And then I looked at the window for a second, and boom, Mr. Paul Bunyan was back at his stand again. All the cars that he had just previously destroyed were normal again. They weren't beeping the alarm sounds, nor was that tree that he was about to knock down over on the side. Everything was back to normal. And then I had to stay 30 minutes after school. Great. At least that gave me time to avoid Mr. Paul Bunyan. But once I did left, my mom came in to pick me up, and then she kind of yelled at me for looking outside the window instead of participating in the movie. But it was not my fault. I've already seen the movie before. Don't know why she doesn't know that. So I just went home. The day was normal until Friday. Friday, March 18th, 7:41 a.m. Rubbing my lazy eyes as I walked down the steady sidewalk that led from my neighborhood to the school. It was Friday morning. I knew that I just had to do a couple things. Number 1 was to participate in class this time. Number 2, just hang out with my friends. And then number 3, get the heck out of there and have an awesome weekend with friends and family. I was walking down the sidewalk, and then I crossed the street to get to the school. I looked up at the Paul Bunyan statue, but then I stopped. He was gone again. Where the heck did he go? I looked around steadily, and then I could have swore. Actually, I stopped when I noticed something behind the school. I saw Mr. Paul Bunyan's ginormous head and his ginormous fingers. He was watching me around the corner of the building school. He was stalking me. I saw him, but then he immediately went back to hiding. I don't know what took over me, but then I just completely moved my feet and I started running towards where Mr. Paul Bunyan was. I crossed the parking lot and I just avoided being hit by a car. And then the parent who was inside says, "Kid, watch where you're going!" I ignored the man, however, and just ran through the school property and looked behind the building. Mr. Paul Bunyan was not there. So then I got in trouble with the principal for almost getting hit by a car and running on school property. You can run on school property, but you can't just run and then, just don't go behind the school. So I just got in trouble for a little bit, but then I was sent back to class. My entire day was normal right until social studies class. While I was there, I immediately rushed over to my seat, sat down, and looked outside the window. And oh my gosh, my heart sank, my lungs sank, and my entire spine shivered. Mr. Paul Bunyan was right outside the window. He was kneeled down. He was doing that thing what he was doing this morning. He was putting his fingers around the wall, and his ginormous head was staring right through the window at me. And then he immediately went away, like always. And then I didn't see him for the rest of the day after school. After school, I immediately speed walked my way home. I walked past the Paul Bunyan stand, and I immediately saw that Mr. Paul Bunyan was still not there, and I just completely ignored it. I speed walked all the way home, and I turned onto my neighborhood where my house was. But when I turned the corner, I stopped. My teeth chattering, my head confused, and my lungs were about to collapse from breathing so hard. Mr. Paul Bunyan was at the end of the street. He was doing his pose from where he was in front of the school, but he wasn't standing on some stone pit. He was standing on the concrete road at the end of the road. My house was near the end of the road, so I either had two options. Run to a different house, run to my friend's house, which was just around the corner, or do I just go for it and just make a run to my house? I immediately went with the second option. And then on the count of 3, I immediately moved my feet and ran as fast as I could. I ran through many lawns and I made it to my house. But as I was running, Mr. Paul Bunyan came alive. He looked like what he looked like on Monday and started running after me. He literally destroyed a tree trying to get to me. Just then, as soon as I opened the front door and shut it and jumped inside, I heard the sound of an axe hitting the grass. And dirt flew into the air, and some dirt even hit the front door. I backed away from it, and I immediately ran up to my room, looked through the window, and Mr. Paul Bunyan, I don't know how to say this, literally walked down the road, on the sidewalk that led to my school, and literally jumped on the stand and went back to normal. It was like I just watched a magic show or something. Like, he was doing funny poses and then went back to normal or something. Like those magicians you see on the street nowadays. And from that week forward, Mr. Paul Bunyan never did anything creepily ever again. He never got up and chased a little kid or me. He didn't look at me completely through a window. He wasn't gone from his stand while walking with my dog. He was not walking outside destroying cars anymore, and he was not stalking me this time. To this day, I have no idea why Mr. Paul Bunyan, why did Paul Bunyan come alive, start literally tormenting me for the entire week and then go back to normal. Something tells me that there were evil intentions with this statue, but I guess I'll never know. Right now, I'm in my 40s right now. I'm still thinking about it. I'm thinking about turning it into a book. But they always say that adults never believe you when they least expect it. But my name is Eddie, and that was my story with the terrifying week with a Paul Bunyan statue.